Trump makes huge move against China. Donald Trump has had a tough time on China mentality, and he has begun to put his plan for the nation into action. The White House has announced a new round of major sanctions against 16 Russian and Chinese entities accused of supporting the North Korean dictatorial regime, reports Politico. The sanctions target 3 Chinese companies accused of purchasing billions of dollars worth of coal from North Korea, as well as Russian agencies accused of providing oil to the communist state. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said, "Treasury will continue to increase pressure on North Korea by targeting those who support the advancement of nuclear and ballistic missile programs and isolating them from the American financial system." The sanctions against North Korea had been approved by the United Nations. Both the purchase of North Korean coal and the sale of oil to the dictatorship are in violation of those sanctions. China and Russia both have a seat on the United Nations Security Council and in other key assemblies where they could have weighed in on the sanctions against the rogue state. The companies who choose to work with the two nations must adhere to the decisions of their governments and to international law. The United Nations agreed to these sanctions early this August. In total, they amounted to $1 billion, as reported by the Wall Street Journal. China and Russia are generally opposed to levying sanctions, but both nations ultimately accepted them due to North Korea's unstable behavior. The regime has launched 3 new missile tests this year and has been pushing out increasingly dangerous rhetoric from their national media outlet. President Trump called China out for not doing enough to dampen this aggressive behavior, which ultimately convinced China to support the sanctions in the first place. U.S. Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley spoke in support of the sanction decision. Today, the full Security Council has together to put the North Korean dictator on notice, and this time the Council has matched its words and actions. If only the two nations' private companies had thought so highly of the sanctions. Purchasing coal from North Korea is giving the nation an income which they can use to further their nuclear program. Selling oil to the nation is providing them energy support. These exchanges could help the regime hold out from following the international request that they stop building nuclear weapons, launching missiles, and stop threatening their neighbors as well as the United States. President Trump announced a new round of major sanctions against 16 Russian and Chinese entities accused of supporting the North Korean dictatorial regime. Do you support these sanctions against Russian and Chinese entities accused of supporting the North Korea? The Trump administration has indicated it will push for more pressure on the North Korean regime. Secretary Mnuchin added, "We are taking action consistent with UN sanctions to show that there are consequences for defying sanctions and providing support to North Korea and to deter this activity in the future." It is expected that the Senate Banking Committee will discuss new sanctions against North Korea when they gather this fall. The necessity of leveraging these new sanctions is in part due to violations of the existing sanctions. Time will tell how Russia and China will respond to their companies' disregard for the sanctions. Well, let's see what happens. But, Kim Jong-un should stop making threats there, That's basically the bottom